Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for day 2 of the 2026 AEP operations training. We're thrilled to have you here today. My name is Sadie Palmer. I'm the team leader of training and education, but I am just your host this week. I bring in the brains because Lord knows I couldn't cover compliance today. So today we have Brittany Bonanno. She is the executive director of key partnerships for not only senior marketing specialists, but for MMG as a whole. So us and our sister company as well. So we're excited to have you on here today, Brittany.
Thank you. So I know everyone is probably expecting to see Chalen's amazing face here instead of mine. He is absolutely our face and our voice and our, guide on all things compliance here. But I am a compliance officer with, as Sadie mentioned, McNerney Management Group. Because I am the executive director of key partnerships, I mainly work with our carriers on compliance. So while Chalen is making sure that we know what regulation is coming and supporting us and fighting for regulation for agents and stuff, I'm kind of back home doing the paperwork side of compliance. So I'm definitely the person you want at your next party, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Totally. Yes. Today's going to be everybody's favorite day. Everybody loves talking about compliance.
Obviously.
But yes, yeah, it's the most fun, but we're happy to have you on here today. Hopefully we won't take up too much of your time, but before I toss it over to Brittany, I have just a few housekeeping items. First thing, yesterday we talked about the AEP toolkit or SMS resources with Madison, that everything is going to be recorded this week. So yesterday was recorded as well. If you missed it, that's totally fine. We will send out the recordings later this week. If you're registered, then you get the email. So if you miss a day or two, that's totally fine. You will have access to those recordings. Let me flip over here to my notes because I forgot to mention one thing yesterday, which is the Q&A box. Please feel free to use the chat box throughout the webinar. It makes our job a lot more fun. You get a lot more out of it. Only I can see it. So don't worry about if everybody else can see it, just me. So go ahead and ask those questions, comments, concerns, threats, promises. And like I said, there will be a follow-up email at the end of the week. So if you want to wait for those recordings, you'll get those. They'll also be thrown on our YouTube page as well. And then at the very end, we'll have our contact info in case you just want more information on how to chit chat with us. But Brittany, I will let you go ahead and dive into our compliance day.
Awesome. I have one quick disclaimer that I am very pregnant right now, growing a very large baby, a healthy baby. So this is going to require a lot of talking from me today. So if I suddenly look like I'm in a strange position or just completely out of breath, I'm not a crazy person. I just have a giant baby growing in my stomach. So just a quick disclaimer on that. So here's kind of what we're going to go through today on compliance. This year is another year as far as there is a lot of changes happening with Medicare plans and the industry, but as far as compliance goes, we don't have a lot of changes this year. No new disclaimers or anything like that we're dealing with. So that is definitely a positive. And as Sadie said, please ask questions as we go. I will answer them to the best of my ability, and we will make this as fun as we possibly can. So let's start off by talking about new hires and staff compliance. This is an extremely important part of compliance. It is often overlooked whenever we see agents hiring folks on their team. So if this is something you haven't done before, it is something you should absolutely start doing, and is required by all groups. So excuse me, there's that out of breath I was talking about. So we're going to have links to all the helpful things that you're going to need that we're going to reference on this slide on the next slide. So just bear with me for a second here, and then I'll tell you how to access those. So these are all the things that you should be doing with your employees when you hire them. It does not matter if they are licensed or not. These are things that all employees must have if they are working in your office and being paid for Medicare business in any way. So that includes things like we have listed here: background checks, OIG, GSA exclusion checks, having an employee handbook, having your own required training. But the things that are absolutely required that compliance are going to talk about or have possible audits on for you are those background checks, OIG exclusion checks, and that fraud, waste, and abuse training that is required within 90 days of hire. So again, we have links to those things that you can do. The OIG GSA exclusion check, that is a federal list of folks that have been put on a list to say they cannot work with Medicare. They cannot be paid for business with Medicare, regardless of if they are licensed or not. So that is absolutely something you need to do prior to hire. So please make sure, I know here we've kind of set up a process where if we have like a few rounds of interviews. So usually by like the second one, if it's starting to look like there's somebody we're looking at, we will go ahead and start that. And that is going to be free. We're going to show you, for the most part, we're going to show you the link you can use on that. It's called Verify Comply. But if you're just doing a few here and there, that actually can be a free service and that you can check that. And you have to check it monthly thereafter as well. And then they also need to do fraud, waste, and abuse training. So most, like if you're an agent and you're getting that already through various AEP testings and stuff, this is for anybody that's not getting it in that form. So we will send you we also have a link for where you can access that, but that has to be done within 90 days of hire and annually thereafter. Now, I have seen, working with the carriers on audits and attestations and all those fun things, I've seen this get tricky because people will often wait until it's too close to that 90 days and then the employee is out sick or something happens and it can't be done. So please, I would just do it that first day they're in office or that first week. Get that knocked out. Don't wait till that 90 days, but it has to be done within those 90 days. And again, if this is something you haven't started with your staff, now is a great time. Go ahead and get that all started.
That's what I was, just about to say. I was like, we're kind of running up on the kind of, it'd be a little scary to not have it done yet for people who are starting with you for AEP, but there is still time. So make sure you get that done, especially right now. Of course, the other best time that would have been was like a month or two ago to know this, but hopefully you already know this a little bit. This is just a refresher, but yeah, go ahead and get started. And if you have any questions, you can always call our office and we can help you out with that stuff too. But
absolutely. Yeah. And it's a great time to start because you're already doing so many other trainings this time of year with certifications and stuff like that, that it's just a good time to keep this in the back of your head because it is an annual requirement on that fraud, waste, and abuse. So jumping to the next slide, again, we can send this out. Sadie will have a follow-up email if I'm not speaking out of line, Sadie.
Yes, I forgot that you can't see me on your screen. Yes, I'm shaking my head. Yes.
Yes, I cannot see anything except these slides. So here are the links we will send out in that follow-up email. But this is where you can go to get those verified exclusion checks done for prior to hire and monthly thereafter, and then that annual fraud, waste, and abuse training that can be completed. Next is, as we mentioned, having an employee handbook. So this is really important because this just highlights your expectations of how you expect business to be completed. This is going to set you up for how you respond to everything from expectations to consequences to data protection of what kind of data they have access to. And it's going to make it a whole lot easier to have these things outlined and all these expectations outlined of what your expectations are, to then be able to, if there is something you need to talk to an employee about, that you can reference that employee handbook. Because it's a lot harder if you don't have something referenced in there and they can say, well, I didn't know that was out of line with our code of conduct and things like that. So this is something everyone needs in place. Make sure you have all your policies, procedures there. You can see down here below, we have, getting legal advice. You can talk to your lawyer and getting anything that they feel needs to be included in there. And it, as we say here, it just helps with those guideposts for employees to handle. We get asked a lot if we have, resources on this, and we do have resources to get you started. But at the end of the day, these are your policies and procedures. These are your expectations. This is how you want your employees conducting business. So it's definitely something you're going to want to build out to fit the style of business that you're doing.
And I think this is a really great resource, even for, there's probably a lot of people sitting on here that are like, well, I hire seasonal help. They're only here for, I hire college students just for AEP season or whatever it may be. But having an employee handbook can be really, really nice for not just you, but for them, because sometimes whenever you have staff that's there in such a short period of time and you're kind of training them really quick, you kind of forget to cover some bases. So then being able to have that in writing somewhere is nice for them to be able to refer back to, and also, you know, you be able to cover your bases as well. So even with that seasonal staff, it's even more so with that seasonal staff, it's really nice to have one of those printed out.
Absolutely. And then make sure you follow this as much as possible, because if you put a policy and procedure in there and then you're not following it, or you follow it with this time but not the next time, that's also a common thing we're seeing. So just make sure you put those down, that it's something you're revisiting often as things come up and adding to. It should be a very live document that you can have, and that everyone's aware of those, and that you stick to those policies.
For sure. Yep.
So on that, what if somebody leaves? That's something that everyone needs to be kind of on the lookout for, and some different things to watch for, because whether that's good or bad, there's a lot of things that you have to do compliance wise to make sure that that's done in a proper manner. So one of the things we have listed on here first is looking at a password manager. So how that kind of works is you can have an account set up where you are inputting, you are kind of the owner of everything on that account for this password manager. And all passwords, websites, everything goes in that password manager. And then you can share that program with your staff, and they can access those websites and whatnot, but they can't actually see like the login data. So they're able to log in, but they don't actually have that password or anything like that. And that just keeps everything very secure. So you can give them access to what they need without giving them the extra details. And then, as it kind of says down below, you can lock down that access. So if they were to leave, you can just delete that account and they no longer have access to anything like that. It becomes a, you know, HIPAA compliance violation if they have access to things after they've left. So it's really, really good, really, really strongly advised that you have systems like this set up so that you can just quickly lock down those accesses, that they can't access things that you no longer want them to have access to. And make sure you're able to lock down that access either before or while you're meeting with them. So depending on kind of the setup of your office, you know, we have an IT team that can go in there while the meeting's happening and be able to lock that down. So however that best works for you, make sure you're able to lock down that, and you're doing that prior or during that conversation.
And not only is it really secure, it also just, we use a password manager here and it makes things so much easier. Like you can get logged in and out of things so
Yeah.
much faster. And there's nothing more frustrating than feeling like you've typed in the same password 4 times and you can't figure out, and you know it's the password. So even just like ease, it's so
Yes.
nice for you. It's so nice for your staff. Plus it just keeps everything so secure.
Yes, it does. And if you update the password to something and forget to tell somebody, like it would automatically do all that and send that to them. So it is truly just actually a ease of use program. We use Bitwarden. If you're looking into programs out there, we use Bitwarden. There's LastPass. There's all kinds of options out there that you can use for that. But this is also to protect your data, your property, your client's data. Like I said, it can become a HIPAA issue. So just making sure you have these systems in place. And then these last couple things are things that we see people miss often when staff leaves, and that is to, one, notify us, please, especially if we had somebody we were working with in your office and we were told, you know, yes, please answer their calls, talk to them about all these things, and they do that and we don't know that they've left. We have no way to change what we've been talking to them about and what information we're giving them. So make sure you're notifying your upline when that happens. And then also make sure you terminate those contracts. So we can have a conversation around what we need to do with those contracts. If they were sub agents or LOA, we can manage how that needs to be done, but we need to terminate those contracts because that can also become a compliance issue, especially if there's any kind of complaints that come in after the fact and the carrier sees that that wasn't terminated in the proper fashion. So these are just a couple things we see missed in that process as well. And I will just roll right along if we don't have any questions on that.
Yes, we don't have any questions yet. I was just going to remind people that feel free to use that Q&A box if you do have any questions that pop up. I know that there's no big like scary new rules this year, which is honestly so nice. First time in a while that we've done this webinar where we don't have a ton of new crazy stuff. But go ahead and ask those questions if you have any.
Great. So we're going to go on and rock and roll down to application submissions. So if you're doing paper applications, we really recommend you get those in within 24 hours. Some carriers will allow up to 48, but we've just seen some issues in how that's kind of handled sometimes. So we use 24 hours as a good rule. So make sure you're getting those in. Make sure that applications are submitted by the person and client that is signing them. So you shouldn't have somebody, doing the presentation and then a different agent, signing the application or anything like that. If they have a power of attorney, that's fine. Make sure you have that paperwork, but it really needs to be, completed by the person and client that is signing those applications. And I know we have mentioned this, we've worked on this all summer. This is not new news, but we are no longer processing those paper applications in our office. We don't have that enrollment team anymore doing that. So please make sure you're getting these sent directly into the carrier. If you need specific help on a paper application or something submitted or questions around that, obviously our agent support team can help you with that. But make sure you're just not faxing us for enrollment applications anymore.
Yes, and that was something that I meant to mention yesterday whenever we were going through our AEP toolkit. There used to be a spot there that had our fax cover sheet and all that sorts of information, and we don't have it anymore. That's why we forgot to cover it, because it wasn't there. So in case you are used to doing that with us, just note that we won't have that on the toolkit anymore, and that is for a reason. So yeah.
Yeah, it honestly became, there's a lot of compliance involved in that, and we were seeing compliance things come up. So with so much business being done via online applications, some carriers only paying on, online applications now, and all of that, it's just a really significant shift in our industry these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And it frees up more of our team to be able to help you on the phone and whatnot with other stuff. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So next up, we have a scope of appointment slide here. So as we know, scope of appointments are required to be filled out at least 48 hours in advance and meeting with a client to write any Part C or Part D clients. And there are two exceptions to that, and that is true walk-ins and last 4 days in an election period. Now we say true walk-ins here because there's a lot of situations we get brought where it's like, well, and we're like, did they walk in and did they absolutely have discuss benefits right then? Inbound calls, this is the same way. If they call in, they absolutely are not going to, you're not going to call them back later or in some way. They call in and say, talk to me now about this, plan. Those do have the 48 exception rule around them. The other thing I will note is with so many online scopes being used, that those are typically time-stamped 48 hours. So if I send a scope today, right now at 11:21, I cannot meet with my client at 8 a.m. before that 48 hours is up. So make sure you're following those as well.
And there's also I think sometimes, we've always get a lot of questions that were like, well, what is considered a true walk-in? Can I say, hey, come visit me later in the office and, walk in, all that sorts of stuff? And a big reason, obviously, we are always going to lean on the safer side of things, but also there's going to be secret shoppers as well. That's something that kind of went away there for a few years and is made its way back in the last few years, especially while we were adding all of these new compliance things. So you're going to get secret shoppers not only in person, but you're going to get them on the phone too. So really stick to that true walk-in definition, and really stick to that 48-hour rule.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to jump on down to websites and online presence. I'm going to start here, and then we're going to kind of get into marketing in the next few slides. So some of the stuff I'm going to be referencing will be and we'll cover that when we get to marketing. But in general, website and CMS compliance, websites need to comply with CMS disclaimers based on the content present on the website. So I can't necessarily say these are the disclaimers you need on every website. It will depend on what content you're providing on that website. So obviously things like the TPMO disclaimer, the CMS disclaimer, that's we're going to cover those, but that's almost always going to be needed, really, I would say, no matter what the content is on those. But you'll see down here below, we also have privacy policy, terms and conditions. And if you're doing business in California, you're going to need that CCPA notice as well. It's I forget what that's called, but California Protection Act is those last three letters. But you'll need those as well. So make sure, if you haven't looked at your website in a while, if you're not sure what disclaimers and terms you're needing on that website, please reach out to our team. We're more than happy to look that over. And then if your website contains any content that would be considered marketing and not communication, so again, getting into that here a little bit and to what that actually is, you would need CMS and carrier approval for those things. And that would include like actual carrier benefits and things like that. The one thing we see missed often that I think agents just forget to ask about also is that last point about no carrier logos without written express from that carrier. And each carrier has their own process for that. So I work a lot of those since I do work with our carriers over here. Some carriers have it where you can submit it on your own. Other ones we have to submit for you, but make sure you don't have any of those logos without that written express consent on there.
Yeah, and the carriers are pickier about that than what you think. So make sure that Brittany would know.
I had one the other day where I think they were all in black and white, and every carrier was okay with that except one. And that carrier said, no, we don't want our logo in black and white. So it's a really interesting balance.
For sure.
Social media compliance, kind of sticking with that online, website presence. A lot of people use, Facebook as their website, which is, I think, a fantastic resource, but we also see that people forget that compliance still reigns supreme on social media as well. Like, you can't just not have disclaimers on social media. So things like social media posts, you must be following all those compliance guidelines. You should actually be putting all your necessary disclaimers in the about section, and in any kind of automatic replies you may need to be having on the messenger, so that you are compliant on all these websites. So TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, that goes for anything. And you can kind of use that about section to kind of cover you on a broader scale. Please make sure you are making sure your clients are not sharing any sensitive information with you, personal health information over social media. Having a client send you a DM with their Medicare number is never a good idea. So please make sure you're advising them as so. I've seen some agents have automatic responses that say like, here's the disclaimer, and then adding, please don't share any personal information. We will, cover that when it's needed in the proper format. And that you're not sending any cold direct messages to clients either. That is considered a cold call. It's the same as a cold call on that proactive outreach on that. So make sure you're not doing that.
Awesome. We still don't have any questions, so guys, go ahead and throw your questions in there if you have any. But
I'm keeping it really easy for us. I'm just rocking and rolling through this.
No questions whatsoever. You're covering everything.
So let's get into that marketing compliance a little bit. So disclaimers, we had this come into play about, I think it's been 2 AEPs now that we've had disclaimers, and there's something like almost 50 of them. So there's a lot of options out there, and a lot of disclaimers you may have depending on what you're doing, what the content is saying. But we do have a really, really great resource that we can send you in the follow-up email. It's kind of like a T-chart of like, if this, then this, on which disclaimer you would need. And I reference that anytime I get those questions because, like I said, there's just so many options. However, there is one, the TPMO disclaimer, that is needed on, if you are doing any kind of marketing piece at all, you're going to need that disclaimer. So that's the one here we see down below. We do not offer every plan in our area. That's the same one we have to say within the first minute of a sales call that's being recorded. So we're all becoming very, very familiar with this disclaimer, and that would be needed on anything that is considered marketing. And this is also a disclaimer that I would put in the about section of all social media, anywhere you can, making sure that's on your website. One of the questions we get a lot is, what do I put in that number of organizations we currently represent? A great resource to find that out, to get an answer, would be Integrity Connect, formerly the artist known as Medicare Center, or whatever you might know it as now. But there's actually a script in there that will provide that number to you based on your ready to sell and contracting numbers that are automatically fed into that system for you to enroll plans. But also, I would say, it's our very best educated estimate. Um, you know, Going at the state level, so that you're not having to come up with various ways to put that in there. So that is my recommendation on that one. That's probably the number one question we get when it comes to this disclaimer.
Yeah, there's a lot of new, I mean, I know that people are probably still, especially if you're new in the industry, but most people are probably used to these disclaimers by now. Some people might not be, but so there's confusing things whenever it comes to compliance, but as you're hearing, we have a lot of resources. If we don't have it, CMS has it, Integrity has it, someone has resources. So if you're ever confused about things, reach out to us, because surely there's a resource or some sort of tool out there that makes it a little bit easier for you. Like scripts
Absolutely.
or something like that. Yeah.
Awesome. So continuing on with marketing compliance, we had call recording come into play in 2021, 2024, where all sales calls with beneficiaries need to be recorded and retained for 10 years. Again, that is sales calls, not service calls. Now that really kind of depends on your processes to say, do I just record all calls? That depends on how much storage you have available and your systems and operations for that. But technically you would not have to record something where a client is calling and requesting a new card or something like that, or to change their, PCP. However, if you don't know when you might get a sales call, that might be something where they call in about that and then say, hey, by the way, can you talk to me about this, plan details, if it was a true inbound call that they prompted. So it kind of depends on your systems for that. If you want to be able to start, stop recordings and handle all of that, if you just say, yeah, I'd love to in 48 hours, and then that would be recorded. So make sure you have your system set up for that, but that does not include service calls. And calls need to be stored with HIPAA compliance in mind. So you need to make sure that's in secure locations and that you're following all the compliance that is required on those HIPAA regulations for that. And you must be able to produce these calls. So please make sure you're keeping them organized in a way that you can find them. I work all of our complaints to Medicare that we get, and typically we have 5 or less days to respond to those. So if you do have something and it was a recorded call and then we need to produce that recording, we need to be able to find it pretty quickly, but also just keeping yourself organized and, not frustrated by that system. So make sure you're able to produce those. If a client doesn't wish to be recorded, you really just need to end that call. They can be emailed, they can be snail mailed, they can come into your office. I think a lot of the times when these call recordings first started a couple of years ago, we made it more of a big deal than even the clients did sometimes, saying that my clients don't want to be recorded. What service call, do we make these days where we don't hear that, it's being recorded for quality assurance? So make sure you're recording those calls regardless of if they say they want to, and just find a different way to meet with them if that's the case. And Zoom calls or other video calls must also be recorded. They're also sales calls as well. Still no questions, Sadie?
No questions.
I'm gonna rock and roll. On submitting marketing materials, I think this has been one of the most complex things that systems are still being worked on. Between CMS and the carriers, we continue to see things being adjusted on this. You can see here that it can take 5 to 45 days, assuming no edits on these. But it's kind of a tricky process. So all marketing materials have to be CMS approved and registered by HPMS. That's Health Plan Management System. That is a system they opened up a few years ago and said, here's where you submit all of these materials to. So we submit them, they review them. As we know, CMS can have some delays in getting us answers on those. So we need plenty of time to have those submitted and approved. Carriers also have to review and approve or deny, and the carriers actually need to do that first. And then once they say, yes, I like it, we can submit it to HPMS, and it will be approved by CMS and the carrier within that system. But we actually run it by the carriers first. The tricky part with that is if you have like a multi-carrier plan material, some carriers will have different things they require. So I've seen some pieces that start to have extra disclaimers added because one carrier says they need this one, another carrier says they need a different one. And then that starts to become the entire marketing piece. So it can be a really long process because then you have to update the piece, get it back to the carrier, and then we still haven't even hit that possible 45 days with CMS. So we really just recommend using communications instead of marketing materials as much as possible. And the communication is going to focus on your branding and your sales that in your process, just to brand you and say, I'm here to help, you know, here's what we can offer you, and not going over, this is the dental benefit on this plan or anything that would then start to make it something that's considered marketing material that we would have to go through this process for. So that's just our general recommendation on that, and we can help you turn marketing materials into communications or help you identify that as well. And this also, all of this also includes anything done by your lead vendors on your behalf. So it is your job as CMS sees it to vet your vendors that you're using for leads. So you can do this a couple ways. You can ask them for the SMID number, which is the sales material ID number, and they should be able to produce that to you. Or you can submit that lead yourself and have that ran through the system to get that SMID and vet that process through CMS.
Yes, and it's important to remember, this is kind of what you were just saying, but even if you're using a lead vendor, at the end of the day, CMS is going to hold you responsible, not that lead vendor. They are not the ones who have to report to CMS, you do. So even if you are paying someone and you trust this company, always double check just to make sure, because if that comes back uncompliant, it's not on the company, it's on you. So just
absolutely. So again, highly recommend using communications to streamline a lot of this. Jumping down to marketing one-to-one consent, this was also more of a change we saw where CMS came out with a final rule that went into effect 10/1 of this last year, where they kind of prepped us for this. But the FTC actually had this regulation also in play, and it went into effect as of January. And I don't know about you guys, but FTC definitely has a lot more serious follow-up and consequences that they're regulating. So definitely want to be following this compliance. So all leads must be generated in one-to-one consent model. And really that hits on three main things. And that's going to be that the service they think they're signing up for is what they signed up for. So it's not a trip to Disneyland and then all of a sudden we're asking about Medicare. It has to be what they think it's going to be about. The person, there has to be listed who will be contacting them, so the entity or that person, and then that is the only person that can be contacting them. So they cannot, the lead can't be sold to, 30 people with all those people reaching out at once. So those are the three things that really lends itself to. And you have to have expressed written permission, as we see on the screen, must be obtained in order to share data between TPMOs. And then I already covered this, but the lead must specifically be list who it is going to. So those are the expectations that are set on this one-to-one consent that we need to be following on those lead generating activities. Next, we're going to go into handling compliance. This is kind of the last section we have. So I started my notes and wrote it really big at the top. Don't be scared of handling compliance issues. I help process all the complaints to Medicare we get in the building. I can tell you we get them regularly. It's usually not a big deal. Usually if you make it a big deal in some way, it becomes a bigger deal. A lot of it is coaching that the carriers are required to do with you. It's usually a conversation at most, as long as you're not out there like, and we have proof that you're like threatening your client. So if you're being a decent agent doing your job, it's really not a big deal. Honestly, most of the time, clients won't even know that they submitted a complaint to Medicare. So that's why I'm saying like it's usually not even a big deal because usually the clients don't even know. So whether that is they called into Medicare.gov and asked a plan benefit question, how much dental do I have? That can be a complaint to Medicare. So that's generated by CMS then. Good, bad, or indifferent. This is just the rules that I'm following and explaining. Also, I've seen it where sometimes clients will call into carriers and maybe they're upset about something or something has happened, and the carrier will say, would you like to file a complaint? Not knowing who's getting that complaint on the client's end. So don't worry about it. Process the paperwork, work with us. We will be in communication with you if anything like that were to happen. Don't be scared. The carrier will determine any wrongdoing in these. So after we submit everything, they will make that judgment. And then it could come down to training, coaching, maybe a face-to-face, or obviously termination for really just wild violations that you may have committed. One of the things that you will see if you get a complaint is do not talk to the client about the complaint. You will see that in big bold letters across the top that you are not allowed to do that. That does not mean you can't service the client. So again, they might not know that they made a complaint. So they might call you and say, hey, I'd love to meet with you. I have these, things going on, and may be completely unaware that this is even happening. So you are not allowed to bring that complaint up with the client, but you can absolutely continue to service them. And then make sure you're answering completely, promptly, and truthfully. But in doing those things, just don't provide more than you have what they ask for. So making sure you give complete answers, but not sharing that you heard about their vacation and what their dog's name was as well.
Yes, absolutely. One way that we used to always describe it whenever we did more regular sort of compliance training webinars is complaints against CMS or to CMS against agents. The way that they are, I guess, disciplined is very similar to like speeding tickets. So, if you're going a few over in a school zone, they'll pull you over and they'll say, hey, don't do that again. This is what happens. But if you're going, 50 through a 25, you're going to get a ticket. A lot of it is all about intent. And most of the time, for a lot of those little complaints, there wasn't any intent there. So as long as you're keeping good notes and you have those call recordings, that's where call recordings come in your favor is, you can go back and you have proof of the conversations and stuff like that. But yeah, as long as you have those good notes and stuff, it's nothing to be too afraid of if you're out there just really truly trying to do your job. They're just there to catch the people that we don't like in the business. They're there to catch the people who are taking advantage. So if you're one of the good guys, quote unquote, don't worry about compliance. We'll worry about it in the sense of like do it, but but
it's not too scary.
Yeah.
Last slide here we have is just on carrier audits. Carriers will often complete random audits and attestations of downline agencies each year and may require partners or other downlines to perform these as well. If you get anything like that on your exclusion checks or data security, reach out to us. We'll make sure we help you find all the proper documentation. This is part of what I do on our compliance team is all of our carrier audits and attestations. So I'm very familiar with those. And usually we're just confirming and providing those policies and procedures, like we talked about why it's so important, providing those showing we do have processes in place for all of the things that they're making sure we're being compliant about. And with that, Sadie, that's our last slide.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, as you can see, there's some contact information there. That is our phone number there. You can also reach us via live chat as well if you want to go to smsteam.net. You can throw some questions in there. We'll be here for just a minute more. So if you have any lingering questions, go ahead and throw them in that Q&A box. If not, if you'd like to ask questions afterwards, please feel free to call our office. If you're ever second guessing yourself or anything like that whenever it comes to compliance, please call in. We're happy to double check and make sure that you're feeling good about the decisions that you're making. Like I said, yesterday was SMS resources, so if you missed out on that, we'll have a recording later this week. Today was recorded as well as tomorrow is going to be Integrity Tech with Ben Lavis, and then on Friday we are going to have Will Pierce on here to go through carrier portals. So be sure to check out the rest of the week for AEP operations training. but it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in. So Brittany, thank you so much for joining us on here today and filling the big shoes of Chaylin. It was wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks.